Welcome to Interview. I'm William McBurdy. My guest is William Misenhimer, who was the first executive director of the AIDS Project Los Angeles. He was also the first executive director of AMFAR, where he currently serves as special assistant to the president, Marvin Silverman. AMFAR is the American Foundation for AIDS Research, of which Elizabeth Taylor serves as the national chairman. Thank you, Bill, for joining me. I want to talk about your work at AMFAR and all of the stuff that you've done with regard to the AIDS organizations in the past, but I have a particular curiosity about the AIDS Project Los Angeles and its incredible growth. I mean, it grew at an astounding rate.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think, and it still is, why do you think, what was it about the AIDS Project that it grew that rapidly and became such a, like there are other organizations like AIDS for AIDS and so on that are kind of floundering along.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about the AIDS Project, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, most of the credit goes to the people that have worked there, I think, and they've really worked hard. I mean, my experience, I was there 2 years, my experience with that was that everybody there just gave so much of themselves, staff and volunteers alike, as well as the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment to found the organization well so that it could grow from there.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, we grew from $120,000 a year in the beginning to about $3 million in a year and a half, or almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's just grown dramatically more.
Mm-hmm.
I think there have been some good people involved, and obviously as the cause has gained more acceptance throughout the general community, it makes it somewhat easier to get financial support.
Mm-hmm. You came there not as the executive director right away.
Right.
You came there on loan from Xerox, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of a mysterious way to enter an organization to many people. Just tell us, why Xerox put you out on loan and why they chose you and so on.
Well, Xerox has a program that's unique in this country, and to my knowledge, it's a corporate, it's a social service leave program whereby anyone in the company can apply for a leave, and they get from 6 months to 12 months. And the review process is done by employees, not by managers. It's different than most executive loan programs, because most executive loan programs, someone higher up says, an organization is called and they want an employee, let's pick one.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way Xerox works. Xerox works so that they give about between 14 and 20 people every year get a social service leave. And you have to, first of all, have worked for an organization before. You have to be qualified at what you're going to do, and you have to assure them that you're going to return. So that's how it happened. And at the time, I had begun to lose friends. This was back in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
I'd begun to lose a couple of friends, and I was becoming very concerned about this whole thing. And I said, well, let's apply for it, and to my surprise, I got it. Mm-hmm. And I did not return, which was unfortunate, but once I was in the issue, I couldn't get out of it.
But when you originally went, it was supposed to be for 1 year.
It was supposed to be for 9 months.
9 months.
And I originally went as Director of Finance and Administration, and as soon as I got there, they asked me to act as the Executive Director.
Mm-hmm. Were your did you have goals that were geared away from your work at Xerox? Were you looking for other things to do? Or?
No, I really wasn't looking for anything at the time, because I thought doing very well at Xerox. I was probably the youngest manager they had on the payroll, and had a great career ahead had I chosen to do that. But if you look at what motivates me, I was getting sort of bored with the work, and getting involved in anything that you're so committed to. I mean, it's like a totally different reward. It's a totally different feeling. Mm-hmm. And there's no way I could go back to doing something that I really wasn't committed to doing. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've stayed in the issue for such a long time. I worked so hard at APLA and then when I went to the American Foundation for AIDS Research, I realized at the time I had lost my very best friend of about 20 years. And I was literally burned out, totally burned out. So I took several months off, and now I'm back, and I have a different perspective on how much I can contribute and when to slow down.
Mm-hmm. Who first approached you, or how did it happen that you made the transition from the AIDS Project to AMFAR?
It was Dr. Gottlieb, Michael Gottlieb, who was the physician who first reported the first cases of AIDS to the CDC. He had come to me, he was on our board at APLA, he had come to me and said, would you be interested in helping us out on the board and perhaps later as executive director? And I said, well, certainly I will consider it, because at the time I was I had given so much to the AIDS project that I thought I needed a change. Being in that environment is just so emotionally taxing, as well as physically taxing, that I thought it would be good for me to change. And from there we met several times, and then we contacted Elizabeth Taylor, who we had worked with before at an AIDS project dinner, and spent some time with her, and in fact she agreed that she would like to join us and help us out.
So actually, you guys went to Elizabeth Taylor. She didn't come to you, as I had.
Well, she had known through friends of ours that what we were doing, through mutual friends, and she had expressed an interest in talking to us about helping participate in what we were doing, and that is in fact what happened.
The MFAR, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, the title is generally self-explanatory, but why don't you just tell us, like, what it is, how it developed, who's involved, how it was founded, what its goals are, what it does, and those kinds of things.
Well, like I said, Elizabeth Taylor and Michael Gottlieb and I and several other people in the community had decided that an organization was needed, and a truly national organization was needed. And so we were in conversations with Dr. Mathilde Krim in New York, who was running the AIDS Medical Foundation. So through a series of negotiations and meetings, we decided that it would best serve the entire community and the entire nation to merge. And that's what they did. And this was in September of '85. And as to what we do, we've grown dramatically. We really have, much to the credit of a lot of the people on the board and Elizabeth Taylor. But one of the things we do, the thing we do is we mainly focus on funding biomedical and social science research in this country as well as other countries throughout the world. And the important thing, a lot of people say, why should we fund research privately? Because the government's the only people that have the money. And in fact, that's true. However, one of the things that we can do by funding independent researchers is to get them started with their work. For example, we can get grants out within 90 days. So it's important to give somebody some startup money so they can begin to collect data that they could submit then to a higher funding level like the government and get their projects funded. So that's one of the main advantages to what we do. Plus, as I said before, we can do it very quickly.
Do they apply to you? People apply to you for the grant?
We get probably 400 to 500 requests for applications every 6 months. We grant twice a year, and so far we've given out about $8 million in grants in the past year and a half. So we're playing a very valuable service. Additionally, we have a lot of educational programs that we've either done, mainly mass media stuff, public service announcements or print ad campaigns, and we're expanding that now to create more community-based programs within the minority communities, for example.
So you're branching out into. Tell me something about working with Elizabeth Taylor. I have a real thing. I mean, I really admire her terribly. I started collecting pictures from magazines, and I found a. I guess it's kind of an obscure movie called Dr. Faustus that she made in 1969 that I've mentioned to people. People said Elizabeth Taylor never made such a movie. And she has gold shavings for hair and lots of gold makeup. And I took it out and had it framed in a gold metal matting and a gold frame, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that got me started collecting, and I even took the picture from the more recent Cosmopolitan issue and other things, and I had them professionally framed and designed the whole thing. And now I've got this big collection of Elizabeth Taylor pictures that it's just, magnificent. But anyway, I did it out of love for her. Just tell me something about working with her, what it's like, and what kind of a relationship you've developed.
Well, luckily, I'm not starstruck, because I think it's important not to know. I mean, I certainly have idols in my life, but they're usually not movie figures. Because of that, and believe me, I respect Elizabeth Taylor's position in history. I mean, she is a legend, and I know that. And I love the woman tremendously. I mean, she's a joy to work with. She is really committed to this issue. And when we were going through the formation of the American Foundation for AIDS Research, I was going through a very troubling time personally. And during my meetings with her, she became very comforting to me, and we developed what I think is a very close relationship. And it's very, very important to me. And as well, what she has done for the AIDS issue is something that we could never have hoped for without her. Rock Hudson obviously had tremendous impact on acceptance of this issue as a disease that people should be concerned about, and probably the most important single event. She has done more. I mean, when people think of someone who speaks for AIDS, they think of Elizabeth Taylor. And I think that's to her credit. She is just a joy and a real hard worker and very committed to this.
In addition to that, I mean, the way she handled her weight problem, the drugs and alcohol thing, and to come out of it like she did is really, really remarkable. Do you find that your friends and other people, you know, come to you for information or advice about AIDS? I mean, are you a figure that they say, let's ask Bill? Here?
Always. Always. But see, that's something that I enjoy. I mean, I think everybody feels the need to be able to serve others. And I find that, so long as it's not overtaxing, I find that that's a pleasure to me to help people out, because I have been involved for about 5 years intensely. And I do know a lot of, one of the things I do now is stay up on everything that's going on, basically in most areas of the issue, which is extremely difficult to do nowadays because so much material is coming out. But it's a joy for me to do that. It's not always a joy to hear what people are telling me, because a lot of the times people will tell me things that indicate to me that they should seriously see a doctor, or maybe in fact they do have something going wrong. But in terms of being able to help them, it's one of the things that makes me happy.
Yeah. It's pretty staggering, the statistics. I was listening this morning to the new, I guess, their projections about the World Health Organization, and I believe they feel there will be at least 3 million new cases of AIDS diagnosed within the next 5 years. I don't know how many of that's been in this country. I guess maybe, do you have any idea?
The Surgeon General and the Centers for Disease Control predict there will probably be around 270,000 cases in this country by 1991, which is just 3 years away. The World Health Organization, and again, those are fully diagnosed cases of AIDS. If you look at the numbers of people infected in the United States, the estimate is still around 1.5 million. In the world, however, the estimates by the World Health Organization are between 5 and 10 million are infected today. In the next 5 years, between 50 and 100 million will be infected throughout the world. And if you look at the countries that it's going to most seriously impact, obviously Africa, I think, is the one that has serious trouble ahead, unless we can do something.
What is it that has caused the spread of AIDS in Africa so rampantly?
Well, there are many theories, and I think the probable most appropriate theory is through sexual transmission, and sexual transmission is easier from men to women if there are other sexually transmitted diseases that are common that cause ulcerations of the genitals, or easy transmission of the virus through sexual contact. Also, I mean, I know for a fact that in the medical community in Africa, it is not uncommon to reuse needles. They just can't afford sterilized needles. They can't afford new ones. And all those factors combined, plus the hygiene is certainly not what it is in most developed countries. I think all those factors combined just make it a very serious problem. In some of the cities, there are as many as 20% of the entire population infected with this virus. So it's something that's going to take its toll.
Yeah, I think it kind of leaves, speaking for myself, it leaves my scope of perception how, what the situation is going to be like. Because with about 50,000 cases in this country now, and look at the effect it's had on practically every element of our society, and it's hard to imagine how, what 270,000 cases is going to, the situation is going to be incredible. As somebody who's been involved with the AIDS situation almost from the beginning, I'd like to ask you your personal philosophy on certain things, and one of them, as you know, we keep hearing that AIDS is God's response to immortality in this country, I guess, around the world. How do you respond to that philosophy?
Well, I think it's off base when you consider that. I mean, response to immortality, that's true.
Immorality.
Immorality. Oh, I'm sorry. I started to say everything is God's response. Anybody dying is God's response to immortality. Immorality, I think that is unfortunate. I think people that say that obviously have a deep-seated hatred for certain groups that are affected by this, and that really concerns me because it is so much BS. For example, I mean, if that's true, then what do you say about other diseases that have, maybe they wouldn't call them immoral, but other people might? I mean, I just think it's unfair, and I don't think it's true. I think it's, most people that I know don't believe that God is taking, trying to get back at someone for their differences in lifestyle. If you look at the fact that the sexual revolution that happened in the 60s and 70s has made this easier to spread, well, that's very true. I mean, in fact, if there weren't as much sexual activity going on, perhaps the disease wouldn't be so far-reaching. But, and also one of the things that really bothers me is that people act as if these people are guilty of spreading this disease when, in fact, no one knew this disease was even around.
That's right.
And for years, no one would admit it once it was discovered. I mean, so it's a very unfair statement, and I think it's totally off base.
We hear, excuse me, at one point you hear that AIDS is spreading in the heterosexual community, then in the next report you hear it isn't, and there's lots of conflicting statements made. What is the situation now in the heterosexual community with AIDS?
There is a lot of talk about it. I mean, everybody's talking about the recent article in Cosmopolitan which said women don't need to be worried about AIDS, which is, according to Tony Fauci, who's the head of one of the chief government officials on AIDS, says that is absolutely wrong. Most researchers will tell you that it's wrong. It is true that AIDS is not spreading as quickly in the heterosexual community. But if you look at the number of cases of heterosexual women who are not from another country, because those people are classified somewhat differently. If you look at the number of heterosexual women in this country who have become infected by their partners, the numbers have doubled every 12 months. And that's exactly the way it began in the gay community, except in the gay community they were doubling every 6 months. So, yes, most people say it's not going to spread as quickly, but to give people the impression that it's not going to spread at all is very irresponsible and will lead to deaths. I mean, it's very simple. And who wants to take the chance? I mean, sure, there have been studies that said there's an affected partner who's had sex with his wife 100 times, and perhaps she's not infected. But then there is also the study that proves that a man had sex with his wife once, and she is infected. And we're talking normal vaginal sex. So I think it's very misleading. Very misleading.
How do you think the LaRouche people will fare this time around with their initiative, their quarantine philosophy and all that stuff?
Well, hopefully they won't fare well at all. I think people should recognize him for what he is. I mean, if this country wants to be classified as extremist and radical and out to lunch, they might approve. They might approve of what he's doing. But in fact, hopefully, we will be able to continue our educational efforts so people will know that there is absolutely no need for quarantine. This is not an easily transmitted disease. And it's a shame because what we have to do is continually spend money and resources and effort to fight to defeat such ridiculous propositions.
So this, what you're saying, is it's a personal agenda of a particular group of people that they're trying to impose on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anything that comes up like this, I mean, it's so obvious to me that there's so much hatred for homosexuals, and there's hatred for IV drug users, there's hatred for anybody that doesn't fit their lifestyle. I mean, and it's just somebody trying to impose their own desires of how they want people to be on others, and it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money.
The efforts or the lack of efforts on behalf of the federal and state governments as far as their response to the AIDS crisis, as far as educating and financial support and all that stuff. How do you feel about that?
I think there's a book that was just written called "And the Band Played On." I think it just depicts the picture perfectly. I was not around in the beginning in 1980 and 81, but I was there in 82 and 83 and have been there since, and everything in that book is very appropriate. It's unfortunate, it's sad, it's tragic, but it's the way things are. So what we have to do is keep doing what we're doing to make things different, to improve the issue. We've gotten a lot of support from a lot of different people because a lot more people are being affected. Let's face it. More and more people in this country are knowing somebody who's affected by AIDS or diagnosed with AIDS. And that makes a difference. And I think the media's attention to the issue has helped tremendously. The lack of federal response or government response at all is, again, and I hate to keep saying this, but it's obviously based on the groups that are being affected. They're disenfranchised, they're not appreciated, they're hated in some cases. So they're not going to go out of their way to do anything for them. In fact, a lot of people are going out of their way to do things against them, and Jesse Helms is a perfect example.
William Dannemeyer.
Absolutely, all of them.
I read a lot about the medical community. Their response is negative, largely. Also, they don't want to treat AIDS patients. And do you think they're justifiably, afraid to treat AIDS patients? Do you think there's enough? Maybe I can tie these two questions together. Do you think there's enough unclear information given out about AIDS as far the vague areas, of casual transmission and incubation and all that stuff? You hear one thing one place and one thing another.
Yeah, but see, people hear what they want to hear. There is no vague information about casual transmission. AIDS has never been casually transmitted. Mm-hmm. No case has ever proven that. Doctors and their unwillingness to treat persons with AIDS, the majority of doctors will treat persons with AIDS. The latest poll I read said that about 25% of them said they either wouldn't or would have to make a decision at that time. I think if you look at the reality of a surgeon, for example, if a surgeon were operating on someone and were to cut himself and to have an open wound and have the blood from the patient get in the blood from his finger, then there is a possibility of transmission. But in fact, to my knowledge, that has never happened. And I think doctors have a responsibility. I'm not a physician, but I work with a lot of physicians. They have a responsibility to treat the ill. And I think if they are performing surgery on somebody, that is the only situation where it could remotely be risky. Mm-hmm. Healthcare workers have dealt with people with AIDS now for 6 years that we've known about, who knows how many years before that, and very, very, very few of hundreds of people who have even had needle sticks from contaminated blood have become infected. I mean, it's obvious that it's not an easy disease to catch. Even if you stick that person, if you stick yourself with a needle, a lot of times people just don't transmit the virus.
Mm-hmm. On a more personal level, Bill, how close to your life has AIDS? I mean, how has it touched your life very personally through your friends?
Very personally, yeah. I lost my best friend in about 20 years. I've lost a lot of friends. In fact, I used to say that I would never keep a count of how many people I've known that are sick or have died. And recently, in the past few months, I decided I would start. And it's a lot. I mean, it's probably 60% of the people that are close to me that are at risk are sick or gone.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
Does that intensify your commitment to the work you're doing? Does it make you angry, or?
Well, it makes me angry, but I'll tell you, one of the things after being involved with this for so long, it's hard to refresh your enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. I think after the severe burnout I went through, I maintained an idea that this is the way it is. This thing is really happening to us. People are really dying at a very young age. We have to keep working at it. And so long as I don't get too frustrated or too burned out or too angry, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I just keep working hard. There's also somewhat of a, sometimes you want to give up. You want to give up and say, nobody can beat this. It's not going to go away. And we're not going to ever have any answers. But you can't let that get to you. You have to keep renewing your vigor and your effort and keep trying to refresh it as often as you can.
Mm-hmm. What are your goals now? I mean, just more of the same work, or do you see, I mean, are there things in your life that you look toward achieving work-wise, or?
Well, I want to stay in this issue. I can't imagine getting out of it. But I don't have any specific goals. I mean, my goal is to put an end to this ridiculous disease. And so I used to believe that we could do that independently, and I used to think that I was the only one that could do it, and that's why I worked so hard. Now I realize that that's not true. So I just want to stay involved in the issue until we can look to better times.
Mm-hmm. does MFAR have a volunteer program, or I mean, how would people get involved with it if they chose to?
Well, currently we're based in L.A. and New York, and we've opened an office in Washington. We don't have a very large volunteer base except for the programs of fundraisers.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have fundraising events, or if people would like to help us with ideas to raise money, certainly we do. We would love to hear from them. But in terms of a massive volunteer base, either for patient care or supporting people or educating people, we haven't developed those programs. In fact, we've left those to the groups that are organized and can do them well.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the most important thing anyone could do probably would be make a pledge to the organization, financial pledge.
That's true. I mean, we, as any nonprofit group, especially any nonprofit group in the area of AIDS, money is always very, very important. So if anyone would like to help, we would be most appreciative. There are, one of the other things, I'm working on a book right now for a chapter that Elizabeth is going to write, and it's called What You Can Do About AIDS. And it's going to be distributed free throughout the country in bookstores. It's going to be distributed through the Book of the Month Club. It's being put together by the publishers of this country. And that's one thing that's critical. People need to know what they can do. Simple things they can do, easy things they can do, because most people feel they can't do anything about AIDS. But in fact they can. And I think one of the key things, even though there are a lot more practical things in there, one of the key things is that they can just educate others. Mm-hmm. They can get people to talk about this disease, to break down their fear, their prejudices, their emotions about it. Because once you get past that irrational behavior, it's a lot easier to understand the reality of what's going on.
Yeah. I'm sorry that our half hour is up. I got through maybe half of my interview, but I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. I'm William McBurdy. This is Interview, and we'll see you the next time.